A little bit of something I should probably mention at the beginning is why this thing is called the last lecture. I think some of you already know why this thing is called the last lecture, and some of you don't quite know why this thing is called the last lecture. So my understanding is that this is Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the sixth time that Concordia has done this, which lines up nicely. The last lecture was started, I think in 2008. There's a guy named Randy Pausch. He was a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon. And he was diagnosed with cancer, and one of the things that he decided he wanted to do before he couldn't do it any longer was pass on like his last words, right? The last things he wanted to say to the community that he had been part of for all of those years. So he did what he called the last lecture, and then it became a book. He co-authored this book, and then he did pass away. And since then, a lot of colleges and universities, including Concordia, have started their own last lecture tradition, right? And so it sounds like, let's see, if 6 years ago, then that's about right. Started about a year or so after that happened. And so in theory, the last lecture is a faculty member who is leaving the university, leaving the college, usually because of retirement, usually not because of pancreatic cancer. And so when I got asked, actually it was a text message, that when Katerina asked if I would be willing to do this, I was really honored and a little bit perplexed, because as most of you know, I've only been at Concordia for about 5 years. So I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out why, when I have so many amazing colleagues here who have been here for quite a lot longer than I have, those of you who are students here, how many of you are students at Concordia or former students of Concordia? That's a lot of you. So you know the faculty members here they just stick around for like a really long time. And the past three faculty members who have given the last lecture, in theory, I suppose were supposed to be retiring or something like this. Well, they didn't. They're still here. One of them's here, actually, in the room. And so I've become pretty convinced that the only qualification I have to be standing right here is that I'm actually leaving. And so I'll let you be the judge of that at the end of this. But it could be that the reason that they asked me is because they wanted to make sure that they got someone who's actually leaving to give the last lecture, so that it kind of matches up for 1 year. So thank you for inviting me. Especially now, maybe with the lanterns and all of the ambiance. Settings like this maybe require a little bit more of a proper type of introduction, maybe. Katerina did a really nice job, but for those of you who need maybe a little bit more context, I'm going to do a little bit of a reintroduction, if you will. Because she didn't give you all she told you about the things I'm involved in the community and mentioned that I teach here. But I thought it might help you to have a little bit of background on that aspect of who I am. So I'll start by saying, and I think she didn't even give you my full proper job title. So I'm Dr. Michelle Jones, PhD. Thank you. Brian, thank you. And I would like to give a shout out to Brian, who made my slides look beautiful. Thank you, Brian Murky. So I'm the Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior and Leadership here at Concordia in the School of Management. And I went to Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. Shout out to Rachel, who's also from San Antonio, Texas. Trinity University is usually consistently ranked one of the best colleges by US News and World Report. It's usually the #1 private college in the Western region. At Trinity, I double majored in business administration and psychology. And I graduated a 3.4 GPA, brought my transcript to prove it. After I finished at Trinity, I went straight into graduate school at Claremont Graduate University, brought that one too. After the first 2 years, I earned a master's degree in organizational psychology. 2 years later, I earned a PhD in organizational psychology and leadership. I graduated with a 3.7 GPA. It's on there somewhere. At the end, when you graduate from graduate school, not many people finish the PhD. You know, a bunch of people start this PhD type of thing, and only about 50% of the people who start it finish it. So they have plenty of time at the graduation ceremony to do things like this, where your dissertation advisor, that's my dissertation advisor there on the left, all smiley, They hood you, right? They put this hood on you that represents that you're now part of them, right? You're part of the faculty. You now have a PhD just like they have a PhD. And so 5 of us started in my program, only 2 of us finished, so they had plenty of time to do this for the 2 of us. Both graduated. When I finished teaching, when I graduated from graduate school, I moved over to Boston, Massachusetts, where I taught at Boston University for a year before I got my first tenure track faculty position as an assistant professor of management at Providence College. No. I'm seeing the kinds of looks on faces that you normally get in a classroom, right? I'm going to stop with my introduction at this point because I think you get the point. How many of you in this room already know me? You knew me before tonight, your friends or colleagues or co-conspirators and stuff. Yeah, that's most of you, right? And I'm going to venture to guess that very, very few of you knew any of that about me, right? A couple of you maybe, but most of you didn't know anything about that stuff about me, and you probably don't care. And you shouldn't care, right? So, and most of you are probably thinking, what the hell is she doing? Because you know me, and you're like, this does not sound like anything Michelle would ever say. All the facts that I gave you are true. But what I want to point out is that none of those things are what makes any difference whatsoever to who I am. And it's not how you know me. And it's not how you decide whether I'm somebody you like and want to be friends with and work with and be in community with, right? But you knew exactly what you were supposed to do as I'm telling you all that information, right? You're supposed to be impressed. I said all the right words, right? Earned, graduated, GPA above some predetermined arbitrary stupid number that somebody else decided, right? And fancy college 1, 2, 3. And there's this whole ceremony thing that went on, right? I even have a photo to prove it. It took me a while to find that. I had my parents try to dig it up. They couldn't find it either. So I finally found it. But I said all the right words, right? That are supposed to trigger this, ooh, impress thing, right? But none of you even knew that stuff about me. And none of you even care about that stuff about me, right? And Katerina's introduction of me was way better than what I just did with this proper introduction, right? Because she talked about the stuff that actually matters, right? And another thing I'd like to mention, and Katerina really did text me when she invited me to do this on behalf of the student government. Katerina's a very dear friend of mine. We've been friends for 4 years. We met when she was in my Business 101 class, my introductory to business class. And that right there, that Katerina's a dear friend of mine, says way more about me than all those paragraphs I just said and the transcripts and the slides and the photos, right? So this is a photo of Katerina and I. Down here are we. This was taken last summer in Porto, Portugal, when we were starting to walk the Camino de Santiago. And this is a photo of Katerina and I, and Dick Hill, and Ira, and Brian, and Rolanda, and Amy. A couple of weeks ago in Selma, Alabama, at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where Bloody Sunday took place and where the march from Selma to Montgomery started. And I think the fact that I have photos like this, that I have stories that I can talk about Katerina, but I could do this about at least a dozen or 24 others of you in this room, I think is more of what makes me and us interesting, right? So it's not so much about all of these accolades and fancy things and all the fancy words that I said about graduating from here and going to there and doing stuff like that. They're filming this, so I'm just going to pause for a minute and take a drink. And while I'm at it, I'll check how we're doing. Okay. So I feel like one of the arguments I'd like to make tonight, I promise this will only be about 20 more minutes or so, and then I'd like to have a little bit of a conversation, a question and answer, invite you to share some things with me and with us. I'll tell you who the us is in a moment. I think one of the arguments I'd like to make is that one of the problems that we've created for ourselves as a culture is that we take small pieces of information that maybe shouldn't be the most important things and accidentally make them the most important things. Give them a bit more weight than they deserve. So if you think about when you're meeting somebody for the first time at a dinner party, you often ask them something like, what do you do for a living, right? And by asking that question over and over is usually the first question we ask somebody. And sometimes at various points in your life, like including maybe this time of your life, you ask where somebody goes to college or where they did go to college, right? That we're accidentally making those pieces of information more important than a lot of other pieces of information that we could be instead asking. And so it sounds like all the fancy words that I said and the things that I said about where I went to school are supposed to be important somehow, right? And yet most of you didn't know it. And you've decided that you like me or you want to be friends with me or help with TEDx or help with whatever it is for completely, totally different reasons. So, and I think it's not just true of me, but it's true of all of us, that we let these kinds of questions that we ask ourselves and the questions that we let other people ask us and the way we answer those questions define us more than we should let them define us. I have a good friend named Jed. Jed and I met about a year ago, I guess now. And Jed signs every one of his emails with this quote. You've probably heard it before somewhere, or bits and pieces of it, right? This Howard Thurman quote. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. And then go do that, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And so maybe instead of asking people, what do you do for a living, or where did you go to college, or what is your major, or what did you major in, we should be asking each other, what makes you come alive? What do you do that's the most interesting thing that you do? Right? What do you do that nobody else does? What makes you unique and different and interesting? I have no idea where Jed went to college. I could probably look it up, like Facebook and stuff. But I have no idea where he went to college. I don't know what he majored in. I definitely do not know what his GPA is. And I would like you to all promptly forget what my GPAs were. I did tell you because I wanted to be accurate, but it has nothing to do with anything at all. But I do know about Jed that he's in Vietnam right now with his wife, staying with some friends and their baby. And I know that they're planning their new business that they want to start about international intentional travel. And I know what makes him come alive. I know what makes him excited. I know what makes him get excited to wake up in the morning and what keeps him up at night and how much he loves his wife. And I think that those are the kinds of pieces of information that we should know about each other, right? As opposed to I don't think it matters where he went to school or what he majored in. Nor does it matter where I went to school or what I majored in. And another reason I stopped my story when I got hired at Providence College as my first full-time teaching position is because right around that time, 10, 12 years ago, something inside of me broke. And my life hasn't ever been the same since then. About 10 years ago, a colleague and I started a little seminar, a tiny little seminar. I think we had like 8 students in it. We called it We Don't Need No Education. We weren't really sure what we were doing, but we knew that a few of us wanted to get together and talk about this feeling that we had that we couldn't quite put our finger on. This idea that we're part of this higher education system that we feel like should be helping us figure out who we are and get us closer to the person we want to be, and instead it was taking us further from the person we wanted to be. It was taking us further away from ourselves instead of closer to ourselves. And so we got together every week. One night a week, we'd get together and we'd have dinner and we'd have conversations. And in addition to that, we'd go on these field trips and we'd visit places that were doing education in what they call an alternative way, right? And we'd start talking about what makes it alternative and what we liked about it and what we didn't like about it. And then we hit on this idea of what if we were going to design our own college? What would it look like if we designed our own college, however we wanted it to be? We had like chocolate fondue fountains and all kinds of things. So some of the which, have gone away over the past 10 years as I've thought more and more about this design your own college thing, although we maybe need to revive the chocolate fondue fountain idea. But right after this seminar, I started teaching for the first time a leadership class, which I've called passion-based leadership ever since. And it was founded then and it's still founded now, and it looks a little bit different over the years on 3 main questions. Who are you? What do you care about? What are you passionate about? That kind of thing. And what change do you want to make in the world? What do you want your contribution to the world to be? And related to that, how do you get there from here, right? What are your next steps? So over the last 10, 12 years, I've been revising that class. From semester to semester, it looks a little different. if you look at it from like a couple of years to a couple of years, it looks a lot different, right? And it's really cool that in this room, we have people who have been in that class, I think, as of 8 years ago, I think, right? With Mika and Colin and Brittany, I think you guys were in that class 7 or 8 years ago. And some of the people in this room are in it now. So talk to them if you need pro tips or whatever. So it wasn't always easy teaching this class, as you might imagine when you're in an education system. Those of you how many of you have taken or are taking that leadership class? Yeah. So as you might imagine that when you're in a pretty rigid traditional higher education system, it's not always easy to do things really differently, even if you know that they're the right way to do them, right? Even if you know that it's a better way to do things. The system has a lot of things to try to keep you in line, and it's not always been easy. About 6 years ago, I applied for a job as a faculty member teaching leadership, just straight up leadership, at a small college in Virginia. They flew me out there, they interviewed me, and they asked me a question which I think they thought was like a softball question, right? Like, we like you, this seems to be going well, we're gonna throw you this question so that you can impress all these people who you haven't yet talked to, that kind of thing. And they asked me, and this is a legitimate question in the field of leadership, do you believe leadership can be taught? And I'm sitting in this room and I'm applying for a job teaching leadership, and I know that they want me to say, why, yes. And here are the books that I would use, and the articles that I would use, and the films that I would show, and the tests that I would give, and the essays I would have them write, and so forth. And in that moment, I decided I was going to be honest. And I said, no, I don't believe that leadership can be taught. I think that the best that you can do is ask students questions like, who are you? What do you care about? What kind of impact do you want to make on the world? And how do you get there from here? And if you create an environment where they can answer those questions genuinely, they can genuinely ask themselves and each other those questions and really try to struggle with the answers, because when you first ask that question, nobody knows the answer. It's really rare that I get a student that says, oh, I know exactly what I care about. This is exactly what I want to do. It almost never happens. And so if you can create an environment where they can explore those questions, then you can be talking about what Bernard Bass says about transformational leadership and the power of charisma, or what Robert Greenleaf says servant leadership should look like. But unless somebody knows what they're passionate about, what they care about, what they want to do, they can't use that information to do much, right? I knew right then in that moment that I was not getting that job. I was totally fine with that. I think they knew right in that moment that I was not getting that job, but that's not what they wanted to hear, right? What they wanted was me to point out all the different knowledge about theories and stuff like this that I had, and that I had the book knowledge, that I had learned that stuff, that I could teach that stuff, that I could give tests and essays and assignments on that stuff. And I wasn't going to do it because I didn't want to be that kind of teacher or that kind of leader or that kind of role model. And obviously it's very good that I didn't get that job. I wouldn't have loved it. So it worked out fine. But it's not just leadership. I think our higher education system does that with pretty much everything. It relies on tests and on quizzes and on grades and on proving ourselves all the time. That's what we have to do, right? We have to prove ourselves over and over and over. We have to prove that we went to class, and prove that we listened, and prove that we read the stuff, and prove that we can take a test, and prove that we heard what the teacher said about this subject, and maybe repeat it back to them exactly using their words so that they know that we heard what they said and we pretty much believe that too, even if we really don't. So our system is set up that way, right? And then it doesn't even stop there, right? Because you have to prove yourself all through college and get all those big fancy GPA numbers, and then you have to prove yourself to people who may or may not look at your resume, and then prove yourself to like some computer system that kicks you out if you don't have such and such number of a GPA. And so and then you get a job maybe, and you prove yourself all over again. And I feel like in doing so, we lose sight of asking ourselves, who am I, what do I care about, and what difference do I want to make in the world? And we stop asking that, and other people stop asking us that, and then nobody's asking us that. And it's more just about the list of accolades and the list of things that we've done to prove ourselves over and over. And once we get to a certain point, we feel like we've made it, right? Because some somewhere along the line said to you, okay, well, your goal is this. And you're like, okay, my goal is that. And when you get there, you're like, okay, now I'm done, right? Now I'm an accounting major, right? Or now I'm the president of the student body, right? Okay, right? Or now I'm a college graduate, or now I'm a professor. I'm done, right? And we still stop asking ourselves, who am I, and who do I want to be, and what do I care about, and what do I want to do in the world? And all of those things I just listed, of course, they're fine things to be. That's not the problem. Those are fine things to be. But they can't be the only thing that we are. And we do take that easy way. We stop, right? And when people ask us at a dinner party, what do you do? Well, I'm an accountant, or I'm a college professor, right? Or they ask you where you go to school, and you say, well, I go to Concordia, and I'm majoring in business, or I'm majoring in biology, or whatever. You have that ready answer, and you don't even think to give a different one. You don't think to push back on the question and the assumptions that are in the question in the first place, that that's the only way to define ourselves, right? So I've been thinking about this for a number of years, as you can tell. And a few years ago, every year at the beginning of the year, I set some goals for myself. Some are fairly practical, you know, like pay off all my credit card debt or whatever. But some of them are much more, I still have that one on my list, it's been years. Or I have other ones, right, that are more broad and intangible, but I know what they mean, so that's what matters. And a few years ago, I'd say it was, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I set the goal for myself to become uncategorizable. And the way I defined that for myself was basically, I wanted to be the type of person for whom a business card could not be made. Right? It's a good goal. Feel free to steal it. So, that was about 3 or 4 years ago. As I mentioned, I've been at Concordia for about 5 years now. One thing you should know about Concordia is that when you start working here, they give you business cards. It's pretty much true of most places where you work. And I guess I understand why. Like, they don't really know what else to do. They got to do something, right? To give you a thing that has your name and contact information and a title and a whatever, right? They gave me 500 when I started here 5 years ago. And I never used them. And so in January, a few months ago, I realized I have 500 business cards. And I'm leaving this place. What am I going to do with these 500 business cards? And it's not that I didn't use them because I wasn't proud to be part of this community, because I am, or because I didn't think I had earned that fancy title, which they had to shorten because it doesn't even fit on the business card. Because I earned that. I mean, I can do those things. But because I don't think this tells you anything about who I am. And I didn't want to give people that easy way out, right? I didn't want to be able to be like, here's my card, here's who I am. Because this is not who I am. So those of you who are in my leadership class this semester, I have 2 sections of that class this semester. We use them as scratch paper. There's 500 of them. What are you going to do, right? But in those classes, we write down a lot of things. We write down, today, for example, we all took a business card, and on the back of it, we wrote down a question that we wanted to talk about, right? We could talk about anything. So today was our, what do we want to talk about day? So people wrote down questions, and we read them, and we talked about them. And we've written down, votes. Sometimes we want to vote. Sometimes we're trying to decide where we want to go to breakfast together as a class. So we write that down, nominate places. And sometimes we're writing down things like, if I could do anything, what would I do? Or, what am I most passionate about? What's something I care deeply, deeply about? Or, what's the next step that I want to take in my life that I'm afraid to take? And I have all these business cards in random piles in my office of things. Well, I don't have the voting for breakfast places and stuff. Those I recycle. But the rest of them, I have these stacks of these cards. And people write down things that they're passionate about, like puppies. It's okay. Or sports, or family. And it doesn't really matter what they start with, because then we talk about why. And those of you who've been in this class before, you know, we go why, 5 whys, to get to the deeper level of why you said you're passionate about puppies, or sports, or family, or whatever it is that you start with. And in the end, after the 5 whys, you're able to take that deepest why and make a vision statement. I believe the world would be a better place if. And that vision statement usually says nothing about family or puppies or sports, but it says something deeper. And to me, it seems like this is a reasonable way to use my 500 business cards, right? I still have about 100 left, but we're getting there. We have a few weeks left of class. These are some of the vision statements that some of the members of the class wrote. These people are in the room and they know I'm doing this. I won't read them to you, I'll let you read them. This is Josh's vision statement that he wrote. And when we write them, we're always sitting in a circle. And at the end of this particular day, everybody had written, they'd gone through the 5 whys, they'd gone through that on their own individually, and then they went through it with a partner in the class and asked each other why. And then they come up with this vision statement, they write it on the back of a business card, see, back of a business card. And then we went around and read them. And Josh would probably, where are you, Josh? You were sitting in the front, but now you're not. Oh, he is. So Josh would probably be the first to tell you that he doesn't go to every one of his classes all the time. He has never, not once, ever missed the leadership class. Not once ever, right? We counted the other day just to make sure that that was accurate. He has never, not once, missed the leadership class. And I think I even heard him say last week, like, why would you, right? Why would you miss this class when you get to have conversations like this and you get to write things like this, right? And after Josh read this, you could see the rest of the people in the class be like, oh, right? And then Nate read his. And Nate transferred here this year. He's on the baseball team. Nate, are you in here? You was. No, maybe not. Good, don't tell him about this then. So Nate transferred here. He's on the baseball team. He transferred here because he got kicked out of the place he was at before, right? And he came here and he writes this, right, as his vision statement. And he means it. And you could see everybody look at him like, wow, right? And Lena, who is definitely in here, I can see her, she wrote this. Sometimes you have to try very hard to fit your vision for the world being a better place on a business card. But Lena had told us early in the semester, one of the things she's passionate about is family, and she told us early in the semester that she's adopted, and so family means something different for her, right? And so this is her vision statement. So imagine if before we went to college, or before we chose a major, or before we chose an internship, we did something like this, right? We had to pause for a moment and ask ourselves, who am I, and what do I believe, and what do I care about? If I wanted to change the world, what would I want the world to look like? And how do I best get there from here? How things might be different, right? Most of these folks, Josh is graduating in 17 days or something, right? And he's probably glad that he did this before graduating, right? Better late than never. But it would be better if you can do this at the beginning, right? It would be better if you did this going into this experience we call college. Because then you'd know what you're trying to get out of it and why and where you're trying to go to. And maybe one major is a better major for you than another. Or maybe one college is better than another. Or a different path is better than another. And only after we did all of this did we go to college. Did we choose our major? Did we do all of that? So I said before at the beginning that my only qualification for being here right now is because I'm leaving. This is true. As of December 31st, 2015, I'm not staying until 2018, despite what Jordan has heard, rumor mill. I will be leaving. I will be retiring from traditional higher education. And this is what I'm going to be doing. Myself and a team of very talented, very dedicated, very, very amazing volunteers who I've met a variety of ways, but many of whom I met through the last 5 years while I was here at Concordia. We're starting our own college. College-like thing, right? It's a different kind of college. We're calling it the Wayfinding Academy. And it's going to be focused on those 3 questions, the who am I, what do I care about, what am I passionate about, what do I want to do in the world, how do I get there from here, right? And we're going to have a tiny little core curriculum, a handful of classes that all of the students who come in will take that's going to help them be better people in the world, better people in their community, better citizens. So there'll be things like how do you take a whole vast amounts of information and process it and make it make sense so that you can use it somehow? Or how do you communicate effectively so that whether you're standing in front of a room full of people or you're writing a blog, you can get your point across clearly? Or things like, how do you work with people, and when conflict comes up, what do you do about that? Or how do you take something that you care a lot about, whether it's puppies or sports or family or whatever, and take that and make a social movement out of it, either in your small local community or in the world. And so it's going to be focused on that. We'll have that core curriculum. Everything else is going to be handcrafted and tailored to each individual student, right? They join us. We say, who are you? What do you care about, right? What do you most want to do in the world? And then the entire rest of their time with us is based on what they say. And they can change their mind as many times as they want, but it probably won't matter. Because once you get to the deeper why of those 3 examples I showed you, that spreads way across some specific thing like sports or family or puppies. There's a why there that makes a difference, right? And you can center everything around that. So every student's going to have a team of advisors who works with them to create a list of portfolio items. So we're not going to have tests and grades and quizzes and stuff. We're not going to rely on those kinds of things to get the evaluation across, to make sure that you're doing things. We're going to have a portfolio system. So when you finish, we expect it'll be about 2 years, but it might take you a little less or a little more depending on what you're doing. You'll end up with a portfolio of actual things that you did related to the thing that you said you wanted to do, right? So somebody's portfolio, they might come in and they might say, well, I really care a lot about this, and I'm really interested in film. So we might say, okay, find a story that's related to that thing. Go make a film. We'll host a film screening for you. You can stand up on a little stage, you can show your film, you can talk about it, you can answer questions about this story that you just told via film. Or maybe somebody wants to do graphic design. And so we partner them up with somebody that we know who's awesome in the community to mentor them and help them learn how to do graphic design work, so that by the time they leave, they have a portfolio of graphic design items that they've actually for real done, right? Or maybe you've got somebody who cares a lot about environmental issues and they want to put together a little conference where they bring half a dozen speakers together so that they can talk about environmental issues in the Pacific Northwest. And there's probably dozens and dozens and dozens of other things that we have not even thought of yet. And we won't until we get a student who comes to us and says, okay, I really want to learn beekeeping. All right. Or I really want to learn how to brew beer. We know we can handle. Portland, we're good. Or I really want to learn how to start a band. And we'll find ways in our community and in our network to find them advisors and mentors and resources so that they can do a portfolio of how to start a band, right? And maybe they make a blog about it or a little movie about it or something, but by the end, they probably better have a band or change their mind to something else or whatever, right? And when you complete your portfolio, you move on. And you go do what your next step is. Whatever that is, you'll know what that is by the time you finish, right? And we're not going to assume that there's some sort of predetermined checklist of things that you should be doing in the same order, at the same time, and at the same pace as somebody else, right? So it'll all be handcrafted and specific for each individual student. And it's not just going to be a different kind of college. It'll also be a different kind of community. And everything that we do will be open to the community. So obviously to have all of these mentors and advisors, you got to have the community coming and going. Places to place people for internships and apprenticeships and mentorships. And we'll have a movie theater where we can do film screenings. And so anytime there's a film on a topic that we want to talk about, we show a film and we invite the community and have them come and have a conversation with us about that film that just came out or whatever. Or there's a space where you can have speakers or performances or dance or bands. So we'll have bands at some point. You know how many people want to start bands? It's like a lot, right? We'll have to be ready for that one. And so some of the people who are starting the Wayfinding Academy with me, actually quite a number of the people who are starting the Wayfinding Academy with me are here in this room. I can point them out to you later if you'd like. But in addition to those folks who are starting the Wayfinding Academy, we're also collaborating with people around the country who are doing other similar things. Oh, sorry, these are our 3 core questions, which I've said enough that you don't need to know them. So the Wayfinding Academy, which is here, is part of the Wayfinding Initiative. So Wes Wages in Florence, Alabama is creating a film about higher education and what's wrong with it right now and how did we get here and what are our alternatives could be. And Sean Aiken, who lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, just launched the Wayfinder Curriculum, which is a curriculum for high school teachers to use with their high school students to help catch them before they get into the college higher education system and ask them those questions of who are you and what do you want to do, who do you want to be, and how do you get there from here. And we're making a podcast and a variety of other things. So our goal is to change the conversation in this country so that young people are no longer told that the only path to success is go to college. That instead they're told that there's many paths to success and all are equally valid, and your task is to choose the one that's right for you. My friend Brittany was just telling a story the other day about her younger brother and sister who are in high school. And Brittany's the first person in her family to graduate from college, and she feels a lot of pressure to tell her younger brother and sister in high school, like, you should probably go to college if you want to be successful. And it's a tough thing to say, right? Because you know that there are probably other paths that they could take that they would be happy and successful and find their calling and find their vocation. But there's not enough of a support system that exists in our society and in our culture to support them on that path. She'd feel like she's this lone voice saying you could do whatever you want to do. Maybe you go to college. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't do it right now. Maybe you do it later and you do something else first. But you've got to find the right path for you. And so all of us in the Wayfinding Initiative, whether we're coming at it through film or through podcast or through a curriculum for high school students or through starting a different kind of college, we're all aimed at that same thing of changing the conversation so that young people feel like they have many pathways to success and that the challenge that they face is to choose the one that's right for them. And we're going to try to come at that lots of different ways. And we'll know we've succeeded when high school counselors and parents don't ask young people when they're at this pivotal moment in their life, where are you going to college? But instead ask them, what are you going to do next? And they're equally as excited whether that answer is, I'm taking a gap year to volunteer with some organizations, or I'm going to go to a trade school and learn how to be a really cool carpenter, or I'm going to work for a year and be an apprentice, or even I'm going to go to college. All of those answers should be equally valid, acceptable answers. So these sound like big fancy things, and we have big fancy branding and little logos and little names for things. But you don't have to do something like start a different kind of college or make a film or start a podcast to help with this. So one of the things I'd like to ask you to do is to join us in this endeavor. There's small ways every day that we can all be part of this kind of change and changing the conversation in the country. Many of you are graduating in 17 days or so. And when that happens, when you go to that graduation ceremony, and you have the robe and the hat with the fancy tassel, and you've got all the pomp and circumstance and things happening and thousands of people there watching and cheering, you should be very, very, very proud of what you've accomplished and how you've gotten here and the people there cheering you on. And you should honor that and respect that and be part of that and treasure that moment. But please also know a couple of things. First, you're just beginning your journey. This is not the end. This is only the first step to all the things you're going to do next. And second, you probably have friends who didn't choose this path, who are doing something else. They are okay, right? The things that they're doing may not culminate in that big fancy 1,000-person in a room, tassels and robes and pomp and circumstance. But it doesn't mean that the things that they're choosing to do aren't worth celebrating and honoring and respecting, just because it looks different than this. So make sure that you honor and respect those choices that they've made too, and cheer them on, right? Rather than treating them like something might be wrong. Support them. They need the support because they're fighting an uphill battle to have made a different choice, right? And that choice should be an okay choice to have made. And also, third, know that most of the learning and the important things that happen in our lives happen in the smaller and quieter moments that aren't marked by these big ceremonies. So seek out those smaller, quieter moments and try to pay attention to those things that you learn in those moments, because that's where most of the learning happens. And most of all, don't ever stop asking yourself this question. I have not stopped asking myself this question, which is how I can say, I'm leaving, I'm going, I'm starting a Wayfinding Academy. So don't ever stop asking yourself, and definitely don't let other people stop asking you, who am I? What do I care about? What kind of difference do I want to make in the world? And how do I get there from here? Thank you. So I have two things. One, if you have questions, I want to answer them. And two, I'm curious what you would say, like if you got to design a college any way you wanted, what it would look like, right? So what do you want to do first? You want to ask me some things? Let me find out. Does anybody have things they want to ask? Yes. And I don't even know you.
I don't know you either.
What is your name? Thank you.
My name is Ernesto. I'm a freshman student in the social work program.
Ernesto, social work. Nice to meet you.
I'm curious how you fund this. Like, how do you get people, maybe it starts with parents, maybe it starts with students, maybe it starts with companies or even like, how is this sustainable?
It's going to be a multi-phase kind of endeavor for sure. And we are also very curious about this question that you're asking. We do have a plan. Our first batch of funding, so we plan to start enrolling our first students in fall of 2016. So, and we're launching it now. We filed all the IRS paperwork to become a 501c3 and done all of that. We have boards of directors and such. And so for our first 12 months of operating, so from fall 2015, or September 2015 to September 2016, we're going to run a crowdfunding campaign to raise the money that we need to get a building, to create our first batch of scholarships for our students, and to hire our first few staff members. Once we get that going and we've got our first year under our belts, then we'll start having students, we'll have tuition, we'll apply for accreditation immediately, which will make us eligible for federal funding, federal financial aid, grants, things like that. As soon as we have 501c3 status, we can also start applying for grants. So it's going to be sort of a multi-tiered approach, but it's going to take everybody's support to do it. And then once we get going, if we're doing it well and we're doing it right, it should be self-sustaining with grants and with financial aid and with tuition dollars and such. Should be. That's a really, really good question. And probably the scariest one you could have asked. So thank you for starting it that way. Board members, did I do okay answering that question? Whew. Any other questions or thoughts? Brian?
Hi, my name is Brian.
Hi, Brian.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you think traveling outside of the United States is for a high schooler or a middle school student, specifically relating to getting a different view of their world?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really neat about what Concordia is about to do is we're calling it an extra cultural experience. Is that right? We don't know exactly what we're calling it yet, do we? Something like this. What we're not calling it is an international experience, right? So it does seem to me that getting outside of your comfort zone is extremely important. But I wouldn't limit it to just, you said middle school students, high school students, stuff like this. I wouldn't limit it I think it's true for everybody. No matter what age you are and how many experiences you have, there's always more to be learned by getting outside of your comfort zone and what you're used to. So, yes, I think it's super important. I don't know that you have to go to another country necessarily. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. I know that you and Katerina and Ira and Dick and I, we all just came back from being in the South, right? Kind of like being in a different country for those of us who live here in the Pacific Northwest and have spent most of our time here. And so I feel like we learned a lot from that, right? So just anything that you do to get outside of your comfort zone. So one of the things that we plan to do as part of the Wayfinding Academy, this is going to take some logistical planning, but we have a really good team and we're totally going to figure this out, is that we're assuming a cycle is about every 2 to 3 years. So a student would come, be with us about 2 years. We'll also give an associate's degree at the end for people who do decide they want to go on to college, so that they have that they can transfer some stuff and they can, they'll have that if they want that. But they'll also have, more importantly, this portfolio of experiences that they've done. We're assuming that once every cycle or so, every student and every faculty member has to go do something where they get out of their comfort zone, they have another experience, and they bring that back to our community. So that means basically giving every faculty staff member a little mini tiny sabbatical. We're going to do trimesters once every 2 to 3 years, right? Which is going to be a bit of a logistical puzzle, right? How do you let somebody go away for a third of a year once every 2 to 3 years? With students, it's much easier. They can go and they can come and they go and come, although that'll get back to budgeting, right, how that works. But that's going to be a core part of what we do, is getting outside of your comfort zone, having other experiences, and bringing that back. So, very important would be the short answer. Yeah, you're welcome. Dave, did you have a question?
Yeah, with this initiative, I'm sure it's the relationships and whatnot that you built over time, but how are these links built between these different resources that you talked about?
Yeah, they're all just very cool people who I've met over time. Okay. And we started over the past couple of years having these random conversations about things. One morning I was having breakfast with Wes Wages, who's a filmmaker, and we start talking about the education system and what frustrates us about it and what we would do differently if it were up to us. And he lives in a small town in Alabama, right next to the University of Northern Alabama, which Dick and I visited a couple of weeks ago. And he works with college students all the time and can see that sort of frustration building in them of here's what I really want to do, but I can't do it because I have to do all these other things. And so we just started talking about that one day and came up with this project, and we've now filmed, this is my film crew, we've now filmed 8 interviews with people about their experiences in higher education and what alternatives they wish they had or have later found. And so it's all been just conversation. Same thing with Sean Aiken, who created the Wayfinder Curriculum. He's the founder and creator of the 1-week job project, and only in this moment am I realizing he stood here in this spot 2 years ago. He's got long blonde dreadlocks, some of you may have been here, and talked about the 1-week job project, but that's his same thing. He graduated from college, top of his class, 4.0, and was mad at the end because he did everything right and had no idea what he wanted to do in his life. And he was like, wasn't that why I went? What's going on? And so he created the 1-week job project, and for a year, so 52 weeks, every week for 52 weeks, he did a different job to try to figure out what he wanted to do, right? And then he wrote a book about it, made a film about it, and now has written this curriculum to try to help young people answer those questions so that they don't get to the end of the process and they're mad, that they just spent all that time and energy and now a lot of money to do that. So it's mostly been relationships and then just starting talking about these things. I think that's probably good advice for all of us, is if you have something you're super passionate about, don't keep that to yourself. Talk to people about it. Start those dinner party conversations with what are you passionate about? What makes you come alive, as opposed to the boring stuff? And then you'll find these people, and you kind of find the people who have those same passions, and you find cool ways to collaborate. Because I do not know how to make a film or write a curriculum for high school teachers or start a podcast. But Anthony and Brian and Coleman do. So, yeah, right? Question?
It seems like the most difficult challenge in creating an alternate education system is dealing with what everyone already considers to be the only correct way of doing things.
I completely agree with you.
And how exactly do you go about dealing with that, especially in as harsh of an educational environment as the American education system?
Yeah. We'll find out. I think you just do it. You just have to do it. And I think one of the things that's going to help us is that the people who are involved in starting this combined, I counted the other day, Dick helps with this number a lot. Those of us who are envisioning this thing and creating curriculum and creating the vision for it, we have more than 100 years combined of experience in the higher education system. So we know the system we're working with. So we're not going into it naively, and we can talk all the talk that we need to know how to talk. So we will get accreditation, by the regional accrediting body, and we're working with the Oregon State Department of Education. So we're playing by the rules and not playing by the rules at the same time. You know what I mean? But I think from what I've been experiencing, and from what I know some of the other folks have been experiencing, this is something that's kind of been bubbling under the surface for a while. People are pretty annoyed with the way the higher education system currently is. Like, it doesn't get us what we want it to get us. It costs us a really lot of money. We go into a lot of debt to do it, and then we don't get paid enough to pay it back. So it's this whole cycle that people are pretty frustrated with. So it's actually easier to start this conversation now than it maybe ever has been before. And it's just that nobody's doing quite this yet. And so I think to some extent it's just doing it and being confident about doing it, and having as many one-on-one conversations as you can. Because no matter where these people in this room are at, whether they're at the end of college or the beginning of college like Ernesto, or they're faculty members or staff members, they can tie into this story somewhere, right? They feel some sort of frustration and wish for something better for themselves or for the people who are coming after. So yeah, ask me again in 5 years? No, we'll see. Other questions? I can't even see. Tori.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey. So you shared other people's vision statements from your courses.
Yeah.
What would you say your vision statement is?
Yeah. I don't think I planted that question. I did not plant that question. This would be my vision statement if I were to write one on the back of a business card, which I didn't do. I just had Brian put it on a slide. Thanks, Brian. So that would be my vision statement. Yeah, it's hard to write these vision statements, right? And it's hard to get the why. And when I first tried to do this, the thing I said that I was passionate about, like the one phrase, the one little word that I said at the beginning was college students. And that could mean like anything. It's like puppies or sports or family. It's just this vague thing, right? But when I get down deeper into the why, actually Colin was there for that process when I did it the first time. Was that 7 years ago? Something like that. I got to something along these lines, that I think that the world would be a better place if we all could do what we loved and we could all take the best possible path to get there and not feel confined or constrained, but instead feel free to take whatever path that might be. Yeah. Thanks for the question, because I had another slide that I hadn't gotten to. Biaga?
So this is more like a thought. I don't know if I fully have formulated it as a question yet.
Cool.
But I see a number of unsexy jobs out there. A large number of unsexy jobs. And I see this program really focusing on setting people up for success and pursuing their dream.
Okay.
And so the dream would, I think, rarely include the unsexiest of jobs. And so do you think that the world has room for everybody to succeed at their dream? And how would the unsexy jobs get done?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that there's not room for everyone to succeed, how do you deal with the failure that the people you have said can succeed?
Wow. Yeah.
Do that?
I don't know yet, but one of the things that, one of my favorite people in the world right now is Mike Rowe. Do you guys know Mike Rowe? He does Dirty Jobs, and now he's got Somebody's Got to Do It. He gave a TED Talk a few years back about this kind of thing, right? And that there are a lot of unsexy jobs out there. And that's what he does. That's what he's been studying and learning about for years with the Dirty Jobs type of thing. He follows people around and does the jobs that nobody else wants to do, right? Sanitation workers or bridge painters or rat hunters in the sewers and, whatever it is. And he finds that they don't hate their work. They know why they do it, and they've tapped into a deeper why that underlies the reason why they do it. So the guy who makes his money off of cow manure knows that what he's doing is helping the environment a little bit, right? By preventing there from being more coal plants. And that's his why. And if that means that he's dealing with cow manure all day, he's okay with that because what he's doing is in greater service to his why, right? To the thing he cares about and is passionate about. And it turns out that particular guy is like a millionaire, right? So, yeah, I think that even those unsexy jobs are things that people can have passion while doing. And the key to it is understanding your why. And so I wouldn't necessarily presume that because somebody's why, or because somebody thinks starts out being puppies, that they necessarily have to go do anything related to saving puppies or saving animals. They might end up doing something completely, totally different that looks unsexy to some of us, but for them it's exactly what they want to do because they've got their why down. So I do think that there's a place for everybody, and part of it may be, and this is where Mike Rowe would, and this is what he's doing, what he's dedicated himself to doing. He started the Mike Rowe Works Foundation. He's got a book and a website called Profoundly Disconnected. And he talks about how in the United States that we've stopped valuing people who are in the trades. And so a lot of trade schools have closed and a lot of trade schools have had issues. And because of that, it's been a long enough time that we now have a significant shortage. We don't have enough plumbers. We don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough carpenters. We don't have enough people who know those skill sets because we as a society have said that there's something wrong with you if you choose that path. But a lot of people really love that kind of work and want to do it, but feel pressured to do something else, to take, the more successful path or whatever. So he's dedicated himself to trying to change that conversation, to reopening trade schools, to making going to trade school like sexy again, right? That it's cool to be a plumber or electrician or a carpenter. We need more of those people. This reminds me also of the first day I ever met Jordan. Do you remember this? No? You're about to graduate? Next year?
This year.
This year. Oh gosh, good, 17 days. And Tori's been counting, like she keeps us, like we know all the time. And when I first met Jordan, it was in the hallway walking in the school of management, and he's like, "Do you teach here?" And I was like, "I do." And he asked me some random question about where do I get a raffle ticket for a something or another for a Blazers game or something. And then he says, "I've got a random question," and for those of you who know Jordan, this is not that surprising. He goes, "I've got this random question for you. Can I just ask it?" And I was like, "Sure." And he says, "What if I want to be a firefighter? Do I really need to go to college?" Do you remember this?
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all coming back.
Yeah. Which is a really good question, right? Because, and he's not the only one. I know the first guy that we interviewed for the film that we're making, whose name is also Jordan, who Jordan now knows, also said the same thing. Our friend Jordan Thurston, who Brittany and Colin know, he had the same thing. He wanted to be a firefighter his whole life, but he goes to college because everybody, including his dad, who's a firefighter, tells him he's got to go to college. Like it's the only thing you can possibly do. And so he goes to college and he spends all this money, he gets in all of this debt, and then he finishes college and he's like, I still just want to be a firefighter. So he started all over again, right? Because to be a firefighter, you have to go to EMT school and then paramedic school and whatever. So that's what he did, right? When he finished, he went all the way back and started all over again. And so that's the kind of thing we want to stop. We don't want the Jordans of the world who want to be firefighters to feel like they have to do this thing instead when they really know that that's the thing they want to do, right? Because people would think, well, maybe that's not that sexy, cool of a job, right? So I don't know if that's totally answered, and I don't know that there is an answer. It is a danger and it is a concern maybe that you awaken passion in people and they feel like they get stopped, right? And then they can't do it. I'm hoping that that's not the case. And if that is the case, then I've unfortunately, because I've been teaching this passion-based leadership class now for 12 years, done that to a lot of people. So if any of them are here to complain, you're welcome. Mika.
So, since I've graduated, it seems to me that the biggest stumbling block for most people is debt.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
how are you guys going to address tuition
Yeah.
and make sure it doesn't give them debt?
Yeah. It's going to be
Why
cheap,
that-
for one thing. It's going to be cheap. So a couple of things that we know are our guiding principles. One is that it used to be that you could put yourself through college by working a summer job. We're going to go back to that, so that it's about that. We're going to price our experience at about the same as the local community colleges. Actually, it turns out to be a little bit less on an annual basis. So we're talking about $9,000 to $10,000 a year for our Wayfinding Academy. So that's for trimesters. And right now we understand that the local community colleges are a little bit higher than that. Also, because we're a nonprofit, we should be able to get grants and scholarships and various things like this. one of the things that our crowdfunder donors, if you donate at one of the higher levels, you're basically donating a scholarship or a year's tuition for students, who want to start at the Wayfinding Academy. So we're basically going to do everything we possibly can to keep it inexpensive. And there's a lot of research, a lot of articles are coming out these days. I just read another one 2 days ago, I think it was yesterday, about the part of the skyrocketing cost of college right now is the vast number of administrators. It's not the faculty and it's not the staff and it's not the people who work directly with students all the time. But because of the changing landscape of higher education, you have to have more and more and more and more administrative level people. And they get paid a lot more, generally speaking, not always, than most of the faculty and staff. We won't have any of those. So we're not going to have administrators. We're going to have only faculty and staff. We'll keep the entire community to about 150 people total, faculty, staff, students, everything. And all of our faculty and staff will be paid the same amount. So we're going to take what the living wage in Portland is. Everybody will get paid the same living wage, a little bit more if they have dependents or something like this, but to kind of keep it fair all the way and keep it transparent to the students. So the students will know this is where your tuition dollars go. This amount goes to rent, this amount goes to us, our internet, this amount goes to running the facilities, this amount goes to staff, salaries, whatever, right? So we're going to try to keep that as open and transparent as possible and keep the tuition as low as possible and the salaries at a fair rate, but not some crazy amount. We'll see how that goes. Katarina, how are you feeling about time? It's like a little over 9 now. A couple people have questions, but you think it's okay? I mean, you're the president. All right, let's just do 2 more, and then we can all. Actually, this might help too. If you're part of the founding. The founding team for the Wayfinding Academy, would you stand up so everybody can see you so that you have other people that can answer questions too? Yeah, cool. Thank you guys. So you see these people who are stay standing for just a second more. If you see these people, they can also answer some of these questions. I presume they would give all the same answers that I'm giving. If they have better ones, write those down and bring them to me and I'll use those from now on. Because we can hang out and answer some more questions after too. You had a question though. And we don't know each other either.
My name is Casey.
Hi, Casey.
I was in the International Development and Service Master's degree.
Yeah.
I graduated this summer.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. I was wondering if you're going to think of options for non-traditional students, because I know you say young people, but at the same time, second chance.
Awesome.
We all
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, I say young people vaguely on purpose because I think this should be for everybody. Anybody at any point in their life who wants to have this kind of experience, who feels like this is the thing that they need to figure out what they want to do next, should be able to have it. Initially, to get going, we're probably going to focus on trying to get people who are at that transition phase, either coming out of high school or GED programs, or maybe they've started at college or community college and they're a bit frustrated and they want to try something different for a while. We're probably going to try to get those people first, just because there's more of them and they're easier to find. But I do think that this should be for anybody who wants it. So we won't have any limitations on our end of who wants to be a student. Anybody can be a student at the Wayfinding Academy. Like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I would have wanted to be a student at the Wayfinding Academy, right? Because these are questions that I think are important at various stages of your life, for sure. Yeah, so that's a good question. And there was one in the back, yes.
What kinds of people would you look to hire to help you run this operation? I mean, who would you feel comfortable?
Cool people?
Who would you feel comfortable teaching next to?
I think it's mostly a philosophy question. Like, it's hard to find, until you start talking about it like this, you don't really find the people who agree with this, right? But if you agree with it, you know you agree with it and you know why. And the trick is finding those people. And so I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, to some extent, because we're doing this accreditation thing, we've got to have a few people who match what the accreditors want to see in terms of people who should be teaching college age-ish students. But generally speaking, it's the people who believe in this, right? And so I know this is going to sound like a little bit of a backwards hiring strategy, but I think they're going to come to us. And they already have. I did an interview with a friend of mine for a podcast about 3 weeks ago that got aired. Maybe it got aired 2 weeks ago. And a woman heard it, who I've never met her, and she wrote to us. She lives in San Francisco, and she wrote to us, and she wants to come work for us, and she's going to like relocate. And in fact, guys, she's flying up here in 3 weeks to meet with us because she thinks what we're doing is cool. I think it'll be a bit like that for a while. Yeah, I think we'll find people, or they'll find us, or both, right? I think the problem will not be not having enough. I think it might be having too many. And we're totally not planning this quite yet because we don't know, and things will change a lot. But right now, the idea we're tossing around, there's a lot of research that says that 150 people is a good size for a community. They call it Dunbar's number, the law of 150. That once you get bigger than that, it's hard to know everybody's name and have a personal relationship with everybody in that community. So we're thinking we're going to keep it at about 150 in any given location. So approximately, at least this is what I told the IRS in all my paperwork and calculations, it would take us about 5 years, we think, to get to be about that size. And we think that what we'd do at that point is start another one. Rather than just get bigger, get a bigger space, or get a bigger campus, we just start another Wayfinding Academy. And this would become Wayfinding Academy Portland, then we'd have Wayfinding Academy Selma, Alabama, or New Orleans, or Florence, or Detroit, or San Francisco, or where? Russia? Oh, Gresham. Yes, Gresham. Wherever. Yeah. Part of the key thing, the reason we're starting in Portland, well, is because most of us are in Portland, but this is where we have our network. This is where we have our tribe and our connections and the people that we can rely on to help mentor the students and give them internships and be their advisors. So wherever we start the next one, we'd have to have a similar network and infrastructure, probably. So maybe it would be Gresham. Maybe that's not far away enough. So we'd have to figure out where that thing is, right? So in theory, that might get harder then, right? When we're trying to find staff and faculty not here in our hometown, could potentially be more challenging. We'll find out. Okay. Thank you guys so much. These are really good questions, and it challenges me to be able to answer these things in like confidently in a public space like this. You guys are awesome. And thank you for being here and listening to all of this. And thank you to Katerina and to Dave and to the rest of the ASCU folks for inviting me to do it. I hope you're glad you invited me, and you're also cool that I'm leaving, because I really am, but I promise it's for good reason. So. Thank you very much, and we'll hang around and like answer questions if you want to talk more. Thank you.